Nice job playing agent, my ex sneered at my open house. His new wife smirked. Ah, selling other people's dreams now? I smiled. Actually, I just closed a $1.2 million deal with your boss. His face dropped. Funny, he mentioned restructuring. Should I put in a word? The silence. Priceless. The text from my husband's phone glowed in the darkness of our bedroom, illuminating my face as I stared in disbelief. 3:47 a.m. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Just need to wrap things up with Rose soon. You're everything she never was. My stomach dropped as I scanned through dozens of similar messages between Nathan and Allison, his administrative assistant of 2 years. I sat motionless, the California king bed that we'd picked out together suddenly feeling vast and empty despite Nathan's sleeping form beside me. He'd left his phone unlocked after stumbling in late from another client dinner. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 15 years of marriage, my husband's carelessness would be what finally revealed the truth. Nathan, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Nathan, wake up. He stirred, blinking at me in confusion before his eyes focused on what I was holding. The color drained from his face. How long? I asked, the words barely making it past the lump in my throat. Rose, I can explain. How long? His silence told me everything. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This was calculated. This was months, maybe years of deception under my own roof while I supported his career, planned our future, and believed in our partnership. I want you out, I whispered, rising from the bed on shaking legs. Tonight. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. Have you ever had someone underestimate you only to prove them wrong in the most satisfying way? If Rose's story of rebuilding her life after devastating loss speaks to you, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us share more stories of triumph over adversity. Now, let's watch as a house of cards collapses and a stronger foundation begins to form. 3 months later, I sat across from Nathan and his attorney in a sterile conference room. The divorce proceedings had moved quickly. Nathan was eager to start his new life with Allison and had hired one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in Boston. I'd been blindsided not just by the affair but by how thoroughly Nathan had prepared for this eventuality. The property on Beacon Hill was purchased primarily with funds from Mr. Miller's bonuses, his attorney stated coldly. Mrs. Miller's contribution to the mortgage was minimal during the marriage. I renovated that entire house. I protested, looking to my own attorney for support. I managed the contractors, designed every room. Sweat equity isn't the same as financial equity, Nathan interrupted, not meeting my eyes. You chose to scale back your marketing career. That wasn't my decision. The truth stung. I had stepped back from my promising career in corporate marketing to support Nathan's rise through the ranks at his development company. We had agreed it made financial sense at the time. His salary was higher, his potential greater. I'd taken on freelance projects between managing our home and planning the dinner parties that helped him network with executives. The Victorian brownstone on Beacon Hill had been our dream. I'd spent 3 years restoring it, researching period-appropriate details, sourcing materials. Every inch of that house held my fingerprints, my vision, my heart. And now, according to the settlement agreement being slid across the table, it would be sold, with Nathan receiving 70% of the proceeds. This is robbery, I said, my voice breaking. It's the law, Rose, Nathan replied coldly. You should have thought about your financial security before letting your career skills become obsolete. 2 weeks later, I stood in our foyer, the foyer, watching Nathan and Allison pack the last of his belongings. Allison, 28 and gleaming with the confidence of a woman who thought she'd won, was directing the movers with my antique baccarat vase in her hands. Careful with that, I said automatically. It's from the Paris Flea Market 2015, she finished with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nathan told me all about your little collecting hobby. Don't worry, we'll give it a good home. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. They were taking the art, the antiques, anything of value that Nathan had technically purchased, regardless of who had found it, loved it, cared for it. Nathan emerged from his study with his golf clubs. That's the last of it, he said to Allison before finally turning to me. Keys are on the counter. Realtor will be in touch about staging for the sale. I nodded stiffly, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Goodbye, Nathan. He paused at the door, looking around at the home we'd built together. For a moment I thought I glimpsed regret in his eyes. But then he smiled, that cold, dismissive smile I'd come to know during the divorce. You know, Rose, you should have developed some actual skills instead of playing house all these years. Maybe then you wouldn't be starting over from scratch at 40. He shrugged. Good luck selling other people's houses now that you've lost your own. The door closed behind them with a definitive click. I sank to the floor of the empty foyer, the magnitude of what I'd lost crashing over me. Not just my marriage or my home, but my identity, my security, my future. I'd invested everything in us, and now there was no us. Just me, alone, with a temporary lease on a house that would soon belong to someone else. That night, curled on the window seat where I'd spent countless evenings reading and dreaming, I hit rock bottom. Outside, Boston's lights twinkled, indifferent to my pain. My phone buzzed with a notification. A social media update from a mutual friend who didn't know about the divorce yet. It was a photo of Nathan and Allison at a restaurant opening, his arm proprietarily around her waist, her diamond ring catching the light. Something broke and reforged inside me in that moment. If Nathan thought I was worthless without him, I would prove him wrong. If he believed I couldn't succeed on my own, I would show him just how spectacularly mistaken he was. I opened my laptop and typed, Massachusetts real estate license requirements. 3 days later, I signed the papers to sell the house I'd poured my heart into, watching as the life I'd built was reduced to numbers on a settlement statement. With my meager 30% share tucked away, I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a less desirable neighborhood and enrolled in real estate courses. Starting over at 40, I whispered to my reflection in the bathroom mirror of my new humble home. The woman staring back had dark circles under her eyes and a determination that bordered on desperation. Starting over with nothing. But that wasn't entirely true. I had something Nathan couldn't take. The knowledge of how to recognize value, how to envision potential, how to transform spaces. And I had something new growing inside me too. A burning desire to prove him wrong that gave me energy when despair threatened to pull me under. I pinned my real estate course schedule to the refrigerator and taped beside it a note that read, "The best revenge is massive success." 6 months into my new life, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor surrounded by real estate textbooks, flashcards, and empty coffee cups. The radiator in the corner clanked and hissed, fighting against Boston's February chill that seeped through my drafty windows. My real estate license, newly framed, hung on the wall, my first achievement in this new chapter. Congratulations on joining Prestige Properties, my broker had said last week, handing me a small desk in the back corner of the office. Don't expect much your first year. Most new agents wash out in 6 months. His words echoed as I stared at my empty calendar. No clients. No listings. No commission checks on the horizon while my savings dwindled alarmingly. The apartment was a far cry from my Beacon Hill brownstone. A 600-square-foot unit with laminate countertops and carpet that had seen better days. But it was all I could afford after the divorce settlement barely covered my real estate courses and startup costs. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "How's it going, Ro? Mom's worried." I didn't respond. My family had been supportive but bewildered by my career choice. "Why not go back to marketing?" they'd asked. "Use your existing skills." They didn't understand that this wasn't just about income. This was about rebuilding myself from scratch, proving Nathan wrong, and finding something that was entirely mine. The next morning I arrived at the office early, determined to shadow any agent willing to let me learn. Most brushed me off. New agents were competition, not colleagues. But Vivian, a silver-haired veteran in her 60s who specialized in luxury properties, unexpectedly took pity on me. "You're hovering, dear," she said, peering over her designer glasses. "It's distracting." "I'm sorry," I replied quickly. "I'm just trying to learn the business." She studied me with shrewd eyes. "Former homeowner?" "Yes." "Beacon Hill, if I had to guess from those pearls." "Divorce." I nodded, surprised by her perception. "Thought so. You have that look, like someone stole your life." She sighed dramatically. "Fine. I need someone to set up my open house on Marlborough Street tomorrow. Be there at 9, dressed appropriately, and don't speak unless spoken to." That Saturday changed everything. Watching Vivian work was like observing a masterclass in psychology and negotiation. She didn't just sell houses, she sold lifestyles, dreams, status. She knew exactly which details to highlight for each prospective buyer. Mentioning the wine cellar to one, the proximity to private schools to another. "Why did you tell the gentleman in the blue suit about the back service entrance?" I asked afterward, helping her collect her materials. "Because he's new money," she replied as if it were obvious. "Old money never uses the front door when staff or deliveries are involved. He's trying to fit in with Boston's elite." I was showing him I understood his aspirations. Over the next few months, Vivian became my reluctant mentor. She never explicitly offered to teach me, but she continued finding tasks that coincidentally exposed me to different aspects of luxury real estate. In return, I helped her navigate the agency's new customer relationship management software that frustrated her. "The high-end market isn't about properties," she told me one evening as we sat in her car outside a $3.2 million listing. "It's about recognizing what success looks like to different people. To some it's impressing others. To some it's privacy and security. To others it's convenience. Learn what they value and you've got them." Meanwhile, my first few sales were modest. A condo in Somerville, a small family home in Medford. Each commission barely covered my expenses, but they were mine. Every closing felt like laying another brick in the foundation of my new life. One night, scrolling through social media, I froze. There was Nathan, smiling broadly in a company photo for Westfield Development. The caption announced him as their new director of acquisitions. The same Nathan who'd told me I had no skills was now responsible for identifying investment properties for one of Boston's largest development firms. I nearly threw my phone across the room. Instead, I took a deep breath and clicked through to Westfield's corporate page, studying their executives, their projects, their corporate culture. An idea began forming. Not just any revenge fantasy, but something concrete and achievable. The next morning, I approached Vivian with unusual boldness. "I want to specialize in properties that would appeal to executives," I said. "Upper management at financial firms, tech companies, and development corporations." She raised an eyebrow. "That's quite specific." "I understand them," I said with more confidence than I felt. "I was married to one. I know how they think, what they value, what impresses their peers." Vivian didn't ask questions about my motivation, which I appreciated. Instead, she handed me a listing for a penthouse downtown. "The owners are relocating to London. They're both VPs at different firms. Show me what you do differently than other agents." I spent days researching the property and the target demographic. When I presented my marketing strategy to Vivian, focusing on how the space could serve as both a personal sanctuary and an impressive entertainment venue for business associates, she nodded approvingly. "Not bad," she admitted. "You've got instincts." Over the next 6 months, I developed my unique approach. Where other agents were purely transactional, I became consultative, part real estate agent, part lifestyle advisor, part confidant. I listened differently than others, picking up on the unspoken needs beneath their stated requirements. To the CTO looking for a waterfront property, I showed how smart home features could be integrated without compromising the historical architecture he admired. To the hedge fund manager's wife, I identified the perfect home where she could host charity galas that would finally get her accepted into Boston's old guard social circles. My closing rate steadily improved. My client list grew through referrals. And with each success, I refined my focus, learning the specific neighborhoods, architectural styles, and amenities that appealed to corporate climbers and executives like those at Westfield Development. "You found your niche," Vivian commented one day, after I closed on a brownstone for a pharmaceutical executive. "Though I'm not entirely convinced your motives are strictly professional." I smiled enigmatically as I organized my files. "In real estate, isn't motivation less important than results?" She laughed. "Now you're learning. Just remember, dear, revenge might be a powerful fuel, but it burns hot and fast. Make sure you're building something that outlasts it." I nodded but privately disagreed. My plan wasn't just about fleeting satisfaction. It was about repositioning myself in a world where Nathan thought I had no place. And one day our paths would cross again. Not as former spouses but as professionals in the same industry. One with considerably more influence than the other. 2 years after my divorce, I sat in my upgraded one-bedroom apartment. Still modest, but in a better neighborhood with hardwood floors and crown molding. My dining table was covered with printouts. Westfield Development's organizational chart, press releases, annual reports, and social media profiles of their key executives. Post-it notes created a web of connections between individuals, upcoming projects, and personal details I'd gathered. This would look concerning to an outsider, I murmured to myself, taking a sip of Cabernet. But it wasn't stalking, it was research. Professional research. At the center of my improvised investigation board was James Sullivan, CEO of Westfield and Nathan's direct superior. 55 years old, divorced 3 years ago, remarried last year to Caroline, a pediatric surgeon 15 years his junior. 2 teenage children from his first marriage who lived primarily with their mother in Cambridge. Member of the Commonwealth Club and the Museum of Fine Arts Board. Recently quoted in Boston Business Journal lamenting the lack of truly distinguished residences in the city's newer developments. I'd spent weeks compiling this dossier, learning Sullivan's habits, preferences, and pain points. According to industry gossip, thank you Vivian, Sullivan and his new wife were casually looking for a home that would impress his peers while accommodating his wife's desire for something less stuffy than Beacon Hill. Perfect, I whispered, circling an upcoming charity gala on my calendar. The Boston Preservation Society's annual fundraiser, where Sullivan was being honored for Westfield's restoration of a historic factory building into luxury lofts. Nathan would likely attend as part of the executive team, but that was a risk I had to take. I called in every favor Vivian owed me to secure an invitation and spent a painful amount on a classic black gown that projected successful but not trying too hard. The night of the gala, I positioned myself strategically, making conversation with various industry players while keeping Sullivan in my peripheral vision. When he stepped away from his table to get a drink, I made my move, not directly to him, but to the architectural historian he'd been speaking with earlier. Professor Harrington, I said warmly, having memorized faces from the event program. Your lecture on adaptive reuse of industrial spaces was fascinating. I'm Rose Miller with Prestige Properties. As we chatted about historic preservation, Sullivan returned. I didn't acknowledge him immediately, a calculated risk that paid off when Harrington introduced us. James, this is Rose Miller, a real estate agent with a refreshing appreciation for architectural integrity. Sullivan shook my hand. James Sullivan, Westfield Development. I know, I replied with a professional smile. Your Lockwood factory conversion is exactly the kind of thoughtful development Boston needs. You maintain the industrial character while creating livable spaces. His eyebrows raised slightly. You're familiar with our project? I took clients through the model units last month. The way you preserved the original freight elevator as a design feature was inspired. This wasn't flattery. I had actually studied the property thoroughly, taking potential buyers through to understand Sullivan's aesthetic preferences. 20 minutes later, we were deep in conversation about Boston's real estate market. I carefully demonstrated my knowledge without overwhelming, asking questions that showed I understood the development side while offering insights from the residential perspective. The high-end market is shifting, I explained. My luxury clients increasingly want character and context, not just square footage and granite countertops. They want homes that tell stories. Sullivan nodded appreciatively. My wife keeps saying something similar. We've been looking for a new place, but everything feels either too traditionally stuffy or too sterile and modern. That's the challenge, I agreed. Finding that balance between heritage and contemporary living takes a specialized eye. I handed him my card. Not pushing, just offering. If you're ever interested in a fresh perspective on your search, I'd be happy to help. I excused myself before the conversation ran too long, leaving him wanting more, a technique I'd learned from Vivian. As I walked away, I felt his eyes following me. The seed was planted. 3 days later, his assistant called to schedule a meeting. In my office, Sullivan described what he and Caroline were seeking, a home with character but without the formality of Beacon Hill, space for entertaining but with private family areas, proximity to her hospital and his office. We've worked with 2 other agents, he admitted. They didn't quite understand what we're looking for. I nodded sympathetically. That's because they're showing you properties. I'd rather understand your lifestyle first, then find a home that enhances it. By the end of our conversation, I'd secured not just a new client but one of the most influential men in Boston real estate. and Nathan's boss. I spent weeks dedicated to Sullivan's search, presenting only properties that perfectly matched their criteria. I arranged private showings at odd hours to accommodate Caroline's surgery schedule. I researched school districts for his children's weekends, analyzed commute times, and even consulted an art appraiser about wall space and lighting for their collection. "You're putting extraordinary effort into this," my new assistant commented one day as I reviewed 3D floor plans I'd commissioned for a property the Sullivans were considering. "This isn't just any client," I replied. "This is an investment in my future." 2 months into our working relationship, I found it, a Queen and Victorian in Chestnut Hill with modern renovations that respected its historical character. It had everything: space, charm, prestige, and a location that worked for both of them. More importantly, it wasn't officially on the market yet. I'd heard about it through Vivian's network and secured them a pre-listing tour. When Sullivan walked through the wood-paneled library with its original built-ins and updated lighting system, I watched his expression change from interest to desire. When Caroline gasped at the renovated kitchen that maintained period details while incorporating state-of-the-art appliances, I knew we'd found their home. They made an offer that night. 2 weeks later, we closed the deal, a $3.6 million sale that would be featured in Boston Home Magazine. My commission was the largest I'd ever earned, but the true value was in Sullivan's appreciation. "You understood what we wanted before we could articulate it ourselves," he told me at the closing. "I've never experienced service like this in any industry." That night, alone in my apartment, I opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for a special occasion. As I savored a sip, I scrolled through my phone until I found it, a year-old post showing Nathan at a Westfield Company event, standing several feet from Sullivan trying to look important. The same Nathan who told me I had no skills, no future. The same Nathan who thought I was nothing without him. Now I had his boss's ear and trust. Sullivan had already referred me to 2 of his executive friends and invited me to a dinner party at their new home. I'd done it. After years of methodical work, careful planning, and strategic relationship building, I had positioned myself exactly where I needed to be. The foundation was laid, the framework constructed, and now I could begin the finishing work on my blueprint for revenge. All I needed was the perfect opportunity to reveal to Nathan exactly how much influence I now wielded over his career. And that opportunity would come sooner than expected, in the form of an open house that would change everything. The opportunity fell into my lap with perfect timing. James Sullivan called me on a Tuesday morning, his voice carrying that blend of authority and familiarity we'd developed over the past 6 months. "Rose, my sister's relocating to Chicago. She needs to sell her Brookline property quickly but doesn't want to compromise on price. I told her you're the only agent I trust." By that afternoon I was walking through a stunning colonial revival that screamed old Boston money: 5 bedrooms, walnut paneling, a solarium that caught the afternoon light in a way that made even me, hardened by years in luxury real estate, pause in appreciation. "I'll need to host an exclusive open house," I told Sullivan's sister Margaret. "Invitation only for qualified buyers and select industry professionals." She nodded, relieved to have someone take charge. "James says you're the best. Whatever you think is necessary." I spent the next 2 weeks orchestrating every detail. This wouldn't be an ordinary open house with cookies baking in the oven and classical music in the background. This would be an event, catered by a chef from one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, flowers arranged by the florist who'd done Caroline Sullivan's birthday celebration, and lighting designed to highlight the home's architectural details. I personally called each invitee, emphasizing the exclusivity of the showing. When Sullivan mentioned that Westfield's executive team might be interested in seeing the property as a potential corporate investment, my pulse quickened. I'd been waiting for an opportunity to showcase my success to Nathan, but hadn't wanted to force it. Now it might happen organically. The day of the open house I arrived 4 hours early, supervising every detail. My assistant arranged the catering in the dining room while I walked through each space, making minute adjustments to cushions and artwork. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A tailored navy dress that projected serious professionalism with just enough elegance to belong among the wealthy clientele I now served. At precisely 5:30 p.m. the first guests began arriving. I greeted each one personally, subtly assessing their buying potential while directing them to features that would most appeal to their specific interests. By 6:15, The house hummed with the energy of Boston's elite exploring its spaces, sipping champagne, and engaging in the kind of muted networking that accompanies any high-end gathering in this city. I was explaining the original crown molding to a potential buyer when I felt it. That peculiar shift in the atmosphere that happens when someone from your past enters your present. I didn't need to turn around to know Nathan had arrived. My body recognized his presence before my eyes confirmed it. Taking a deep breath, I excused myself from my conversation and turned with a professional smile. There they stood, Nathan in an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the slight thickening around his middle, and Allison beside him, her blonde hair cut in a sleek bob, wearing a dress that tried too hard to belong in this setting. Nathan, Allison, I greeted them with the same tone I'd used for every other guest. Welcome to Marlborough Street. Nathan's momentary surprise gave way to something else. An appraising look that traveled from my face to my shoes and back again. Rose, he replied. Playing real estate agent at a big girl open house. How unexpected. Allison gave a tight smile. The house is lovely. Did you pick out the furniture yourself? You always did have a knack for decorating other people's homes. I could feel a flush rising in my neck but kept my expression neutral. The furnishings are the owners, though I did consult on positioning to showcase the architectural features. Please help yourselves to refreshments in the dining room. As I began to turn away, Nathan caught my elbow. Seriously, Rose. I'm impressed you landed a listing in this neighborhood. Must be through one of Vivian's connections. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. He was implying I couldn't have secured this on my own merit. Actually, I replied evenly, removing my arm from his grasp, the seller is a referral from one of my clients. I've developed quite a network in the past few years. Allison laughed lightly. It's so sweet how you found this little career. Nathan says the market is cooling though. Must be getting harder to make commission with interest rates rising. Before I could respond, I noticed James Sullivan entering the foyer. He spotted me and made his way over, nodding to various acquaintances but clearly heading directly to where I stood with Nathan and Allison. Rose, he called warmly, this is even more impressive than I expected. Margaret just texted me that she's already received 2 inquiries about early offers. Nathan's expression froze as he recognized his CO. Allison's eyes widened slightly. James, I smiled, feeling a surge of satisfaction at the perfect timing. I'm so glad you could make it. Have you met Nathan Miller? He's one of your directors at Westfield. Sullivan turned, his expression showing only polite interest. Miller? Acquisitions department, correct? Yes, sir, Nathan said quickly, extending his hand with newfound deference. It's a pleasure to see you outside the office. This is my wife, Allison. Mr. Sullivan, Allison gushed. We've met at the holiday party. Your speech about Westfield's vision was so inspiring. Sullivan nodded vaguely before turning back to me. Rose, when you have a moment, I'd like your thoughts on that property we discussed for our new satellite office. Caroline and I were so impressed with how you handled our home purchase that I've convinced the board to consult you on our commercial acquisitions as well. I caught Nathan's stunned expression from the corner of my eye. Of course, James. I've prepared some preliminary market analyses. We can discuss them whenever is convenient for you. Excellent. The board meets next Tuesday to discuss the restructuring. I'd like you to present your findings directly to them. He glanced at his watch. I need to circulate, but let's touch base tomorrow. As Sullivan moved away, I turned back to Nathan and Allison, whose expressions had transformed completely. Nathan looked pale, while Allison's smile had become fixed and uncertain. You're consulting for Westfield? Nathan asked, his voice lower now, all condescension gone. I smiled with practiced ease. James values my market insights. You know how important finding the right property can be for a company's image and operations. I didn't realize you and James Sullivan were on a first-name basis, Allison commented, her tone suddenly careful. Oh yes, I replied. After I helped them find their home in Chestnut Hill, we've developed quite a close professional relationship. I paused deliberately. He mentioned restructuring at Westfield? I hope that doesn't affect your department, Nathan. In this market, companies are always looking to trim redundancies. Nathan's jaw tightened. I'm a key player in acquisitions. Of course you are, I said sympathetically. But James did mention he's looking for people who understand both development potential and market realities. It's such a specialized perspective. I let the implication hang in the air between us. That I had influence with the man who controlled Nathan's professional future. That the skills he had dismissed in me were now valued by his superior. That the woman he had discarded was now in a position to impact his career. If you'll excuse me, I said pleasantly, I should check on my other guests. Feel free to explore the property. The third-floor master suite has a remarkable view of the garden. I leaned in slightly. Unless you need to leave early? I understand completely if you have other commitments this evening. As I walked away, I felt their eyes on my back, and for the first time since our divorce, I truly believed in the power of patience, preparation, and perfect timing. The blueprint I had so carefully drafted was now a fully constructed reality, and Nathan was finally seeing it. And me, clearly. The Marlborough Street open house ended with 6 potential offers and 1 shattered illusion. Nathan's belief that I had faded into insignificance after our divorce. I maintained my professional composure throughout the evening, but the moment I closed my apartment door behind me, I kicked off my heels and laughed out loud. The look on Nathan's face when Sullivan mentioned the restructuring had been priceless. Worth every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt during my climb back from nothing. The following morning, my phone rang while I was reviewing comps for another listing. Rose? It's Nathan. My heart skipped. I hadn't expected him to reach out so directly. Nathan, what can I do for you? His voice had none of yesterday's condescension. I was hoping we could meet for coffee. To catch up properly. Catch up, I repeated, letting skepticism color my tone. Look, it was good seeing you yesterday. You've obviously done well for yourself. I thought perhaps we could clear the air. I closed my eyes, recognizing the strategy. Nathan had always reached out to smooth things over when he needed something. Sure. How about Café Vittoria at 2? The North End Cafe was busy enough to ensure our conversation would remain private amid the ambient noise, but not so crowded that we'd be rushed. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table that gave me a view of the door. When Nathan walked in, his confident stride couldn't mask the tension in his shoulders. Rose, he said, leaning in for an awkward half-hug I didn't reciprocate. You look great. Thank you. How's Allison? A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. She's fine. Busy with work. The small talk lasted through ordering our coffees, but once the barista walked away, Nathan leaned forward. I'll be direct. I understand you've been working closely with James Sullivan. I have. I was surprised to hear about your involvement with Westfield's expansion plans. I sipped my espresso. James values outside perspective. Commercial real estate isn't that different from residential at the core. It's still about understanding needs and potential. Nathan nodded too enthusiastically. Absolutely. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. I've been developing a new acquisition strategy for mid-market properties with tremendous upside potential. Sullivan hasn't fully appreciated the concept yet, but someone with your understanding might see its value. And there was. Nathan wanted me to advocate for him with Sullivan. That sounds interesting, I replied neutrally. I thought perhaps you could mention it to Sullivan. Coming from you, he might be more receptive. Nathan's smile was the same one he'd used when trying to charm dinner party guests. We may have had our differences, but we were partners once. We understood each other's strengths. I studied him, this man who had once been the center of my world. You mean the way you understood my strengths when you told me I had no actual skills? Or when you said I'd never amount to anything without you? His smile faltered. Rose, that was said in anger during a difficult time. Look at what you've accomplished. Clearly I was wrong. Yes, I agreed quietly. You were. The silence stretched between us. I could see the calculation behind his eyes. How much contrition to show, how much flattery to deploy. All I'm asking, he finally said, is that you don't actively work against me. The restructuring is making everyone nervous. I thought of all the ways I could respond. The cutting remarks, the righteous anger, the cold dismissal. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind for years. But sitting across from Nathan now, I felt something unexpected. Emptiness where the burning desire for revenge had been. I need to go, I said, placing money on the table for both our coffees. Good luck with your strategy, Nathan. His face hardened. So that's it? You're going to use your relationship with Sullivan against me? After everything we shared. I stood, gathering my purse. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. But I owe you nothing. 2 days later, James Sullivan invited me to lunch at his club. The wood-paneled dining room hummed with the quiet conversations of Boston's business elite. The board was impressed with your market analysis, Sullivan said, cutting into his steak. We'll be moving forward with the Seaport location based on your recommendation. I'm glad to hear it. The area has tremendous growth potential. Sullivan nodded. Which brings me to a more delicate matter. I couldn't help but notice the tension between you and Nathan Miller at the open house. My hand stilled on my water glass. We have a history. I gathered that. Sullivan studied me thoughtfully. I don't pry into my employees' personal lives, but I should mention that there have been concerns about Miller's judgment recently. Several acquisitions he championed have underperformed, and his department's analyses have been increasingly divorced from market realities. My mouth went dry. I see. The restructuring offers an opportunity to make changes. Miller's position is being re-evaluated. Sullivan leaned back. I value your insight, Rose. You've demonstrated exceptional understanding of what creates genuine value in property. If you have any perspective on Miller's professional capabilities, I'd consider it. This was it, the moment I'd positioned myself for. One word from me could tip the scales against Nathan. The power was intoxicating yet strangely hollow. James, I said carefully, I couldn't in good conscience comment on Nathan's professional abilities. Our personal history would color any assessment I might offer. Sullivan's expression revealed respect for my answer. Fair enough. I appreciate your integrity. That night, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, turning the day's events over in my mind. I'd had exactly what I wanted. The power to hurt Nathan the way he'd hurt me, and I'd walked away from it. Not to protect him but to protect something in myself that I valued more than revenge. My phone chimed with a text from Sullivan. Decision made on restructuring. Miller stays but reassigned to regional development. Your discretion appreciated. Still on for the charity gala next month. I smiled, a weight lifting that I hadn't known I was carrying. Nathan would keep his job but lose his prestige and autonomy. A consequence of his own actions, not my intervention. 3 weeks later, I closed the deal on the Marlborough Street house for $1.2 million over asking price. My largest commission yet. As I signed the final paperwork, I realized that the true cost of closing wasn't measured in dollars or revenge. It was measured in the person I had become through loss and rebuilding. Someone stronger, more capable, and ultimately more at peace than the woman who had once defined herself through someone else's eyes. I had set out to prove Nathan wrong about me, but somewhere along the way I had proven something more important to myself. That my value had never been dependent on his assessment. That realization, more than any revenge, was the true victory. The following weekend I met with a realtor about a charming brownstone in Back Bay. Not as grand as my former Beacon Hill home but uniquely mine. As I walked through the sunlit rooms, I felt no ghosts of the past, only possibilities for the future. I'll take it, I told the agent, feeling the rightness of the decision settle into my bones. This was the real closing cost. Letting go of the past to invest fully in my own future. The revenge that had driven me had served its purpose, pushing me to rebuild when I might have collapsed. But it was time to acknowledge that the best revenge wasn't making Nathan see my worth. It was finally seeing it clearly for myself. If Rose's journey of turning heartbreak into triumph resonated with you, hit subscribe for more stories of sweet revenge and personal victory. Drop a comment about your own comeback story. We're all in this together. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes success truly is the best revenge.